Okay, this is fourth grade lesson 513, planning a school fair. This is going to be a classic example of multi-step story problem solving. Okay, they're going to have you do multiple things here. It's not just going to be like, hey, let's add these two numbers up. It's going to be, hey, let's multiply this, add this, and then find the difference. It's going to be a number of things combined. In fact, if you're adding and then finding the difference, yeah, that could still work. Either way, let's get into it. Let's dive in. I'll show you what I'm talking about. We have Ian and Sarita. They are planning the Quincy Elementary School Spring Fair. Ian gathered information about possible entertainers, while Sarita gathered information about possible food choices. They presented their information to the school principal in the tables below. So they're throwing a lot of information at you here. Looks like they're thinking about getting some jugglers, a singing group, tumblers, tap dancers. They're really going all out here. They're trying to figure out what makes the most sense for their school. And even in terms of the food, we're talking about corn on the cob, burrito sandwiches, baked potatoes. Whew, that's a lot of stuff. So there's multiple categories here in addition to just what the options are. There goes my cat. We have number of performers. So the jugglers come in groups of 3 and they will work for 2 hours, and that cost per performer is $30 an hour. Now if you go down on each subsequent option, you'll notice that that covers the same categories: number of performers, how long they will perform, and how much they cost per hour. So even just looking right away, you can tell that, man, if you want tap dancers at your party, you're going to have to be prepared to drop a little bit of dough. So, I mean, just from looking at it here, your best case scenario might be that singing group, $16 an hour. But, the other thing you have to think about is how many people are performing. Because even though this is only $16 an hour, there's 4 performers, or there's only 3 jugglers. So there's a lot to think about here, okay? So why don't we just go ahead and take a look at the question below, and we'll start digging in. We'll come down to the food option. I'm sure that will pop back up in a moment. So number 1, slide down here. The principal has several questions for Ian and Sarita about what they learned. Help them answer the principal's questions. Express solution strategies. Well, there's a little alliteration going on there. Express solution strategies with a single number model, or with single number models, and answers with correct units. So number 1 is asking, how much more would it cost to hire the tumblers than the singing group? So we're going to have to bounce back up. We're going to be dealing with the tumblers and the singing group. So the first thing we need to do is find out how much the tumblers would actually cost if we booked them. So the easy trap that a lot of people fall into is they come over and they say, okay, I found tumblers and it costs $22 an hour. So tumblers cost $22. The singing group costs $16, so that's a difference of $6. And they say, we're done. But you guys are smarter than that. You know better. Okay, that's not just $22 an hour. That's $22 per performer per hour. So if we look, here's where the fun starts. Tumblers have 8 performers, and they perform for 3 hours. So the first thing we're going to do is find out if there's 8 performers and they're each making $22 an hour. Let's find out how much they would make in 1 hour altogether. And of course, that's going to be taking $22 and multiplying it by 8. We need to have $22 paid to every single tumbler. So I'm not quite sure. I might have to shift over my scrap paper here. We're going to go 22 times 8. And now, since this is not a multiplication functionality lesson. It's not about whether you can multiply, it's about whether you know what to multiply. If you want to use a calculator on this, I won't mind it for this lesson, but I'm going old school. 8 times 2 is 16. Carry the 1. 8 times 2 is 16 plus that 1 is 17. So for 1 hour, tumblers are going to cost $176. But we also need to look and see how long they perform. And looking back at my table, it looks like the tumblers are going to perform for 3 hours. So that means in 1 hour they're making this much, but they're not just performing for 1 hour. We need to do 3 hours total. That's going to be, there's a few ways you can tackle that. You can do 176 plus 176 plus 176, or you can go 176 3 times, also known as times 3. So I'm going to say tumblers 1 hour, 176. Let's find out how much they will be earning over 3 hours. 3 times 6 is 18. 3 times 7 is 21, plus that 1 is 22. We need to carry that 2 for the 20. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 2 is 5. So, holy cow. If you book those tumblers, they're going to cost $528. Let's look at the singing group. $16 an hour. We know that's only per performer. So I'm going to ask you, can you find out how many performers do we actually have in the singing group? And you can find under our column for number of performers, there's 4 of them. So we're going to have to do 16. I'm going to box this guy off. This is for my tumblers. I'm going to circle my answer so I know where I'm looking. And now here's my singing. So we're going to take 16 and we need to multiply it by the number of performers, because there's going to be 4 people making this much. And that is 16 times 4. You can do some mental math. I'm going to throw it at you like this. I know 16 times 2 is 32. And I know 32 times 2 is 64. So I'm going to jump ahead. I'm going to take the shortcut route on that. I know that to be true, unless I'm wrong, in which case maybe I should go and do it the right way. But I'm relatively confident that this is 64. So we have $64 for 1 hour. Remember, this is singing for an hour. However, we need to find out how many hours they're performing. They are performing for, let's see here, for 3 hours. So they're making 64 in an hour, but they're performing for 3 of those hours. So we have to take that $64, multiply it times 3 for every single hour. 3 times 4, 12. Carry that 1. 3 times 6, I know you guys know this, 18. Add that 1 is 19. Sorry, I had to second guess myself for a minute. So over the course of 3 hours, our singing group will be making $192. And just by looking at this, you guys can probably tell who's going to run you a whole lot more money. If you book those tumblers, you're going to be paying more than $500,000. But of course, if you look at our question, they don't want to know just who is going to be costing more. They literally want to know how much more would it cost. Okay, they basically tell us already. We know the tumbler is going to be more, but by how much more? So here's our 2 numbers, 528 and 192. How do we find the difference between 2 numbers? I'm going to repeat that. How do we find the difference? And when you hear difference, that should be a hint right away that we are talking subtraction. So our number model with our unknown, we're going to take our tumbler total, 528, and we are going to subtract the singing total of 192. And they want us to use an unknown, and I'm going to go with one of these little like math T's we always see around. Okay, and did you guys notice what I missed? What I always miss, and a couple lessons ago I even like caught myself. We never estimated. We probably still can now. It's probably not too late. If you take a look at 528, you want to ask yourself, you know, what benchmark is 528 closest to? Is it going to be closest to 500, 550, 600? And what's easiest for me is to say, you know what, it's pretty close to 500. I know it's something I can work with really well. You might be able to say 550 because technically it is closer to 550 than it would be to 500. But I'm going to say we're still in the ballpark where either would work. In 192, I bet you guys could look at and say, wow, that's really close to 200. So why don't we estimate and say 500 minus 200? And just mental math, we know 5 minus 2 is 3. So it should be around $300 more. Let's do the actual math. 528 minus 192. And notice I'm using a notebook. I'm sorry, I forgot to send your notebooks home with you. If you have a scrap piece of paper, if you have your own notebook at home, line paper, literally anything you can write on. This may take a little bit extra space. For me, this is not enough room. So I just said, you know what, let's just start with the notebook right away. So this is a nice start. We can do 8 minus 2. That will be 6. This one's not going to work. If you have 2 apples and you want to take 9 away, that doesn't make sense. You can't do it. We need to borrow. We're going to take a 10 from here. He's going to turn to a 4. You're at 12 now, buddy. 12 minus 9 is, 3. You can either do the whole 9